The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Hello, and welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I am your host, Peter Martin, Vice President of Business Development for Cref. Cref has offices in Boston, Massachusetts, Dallas, Texas, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Salt Lake City, Utah. You can find us on the World Wide Web. I'm happy to welcome today's guest, Donya Brown. Donya is the Regional Director of Facilities Management and Support Services for the Mount Carmel Health System in Columbus, Ohio. Welcome, Donya.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We were supposed to record this last week, and this is why I'm not an admin and why I have everlasting respect for the jobs that admin do trying to schedule meetings. I scheduled this meeting for last week. Only thing is I didn't invite you. So it was, you were always prompt when we were supposed to speak. So when you didn't join, I'm like, shoot, let me see. And sure enough, I looked back at the calendar invite and you weren't on there. So
yeah, we would have gotten the tux had I last
Oh, really? Were you wearing the tux last week?
Yeah, the day you see me wearing the tux, I want you to make sure you record it.
All right. Well, tell us, Donya, Regional Director, Facilities Management and Support Services. What does your role entail with Mount Carmel? How big's your system? Tell us a little bit about your scope of responsibility and your role.
Yeah, well, Mount Carmel is currently a 5-hospital system, soon to be 6. We're in the process right now of building a $278 million, crown jewel in Dublin. And it's going well, on time, on budget, scheduled to be completed in April. So starting out with 30 beds, we'll soon end up with 60. Huge outpatient area. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the entire city is excited about it. And it's even spurned some growth in some of our I wouldn't call them competitive markets, but our partner markets to expand on some of their presence in that area. So really proud of that. Got here about 3 years ago. And the original scope was 7 service lines, 3 of them in a matrix environment. And I can explain that if you want me to, with the original 6 hospitals that we have in the Columbus area. And it's been a massive change in regard to where I came from. I'm originally from Dallas, of course, where one of your offices are. And as much as I miss Texas, Columbus in Ohio has been great to us. And I'm excited about it. I mean, we're pivoting into a new space. When I got here, it was post-COVID. We were in, I wouldn't say dire straits, but we were trying to understand from a financial standpoint and from an organization standpoint what we wanted to look like. And so I think they needed a different level of leadership, someone who had experience in some other places, and at the same time could get the service lines to be aligned in what the expectations were. They were doing a really good job in those matrixed service lines, which are environmental services, food nutrition services, and clinical engineering. And where I think they needed the most help was in security, facilities, design and construction, telecommunications, which are the operators, and environmental health and safety. And so they asked me to join the team. I was happy to do it. I walked into a completely empty office because we were still in COVID. And I think one of the biggest challenges were how do I lay the foundation for what I want to do without the amount of eyeballs that would be on site to see exactly what the plan is and how to articulate the plan to make sure that I was getting the right feedback for success. So
let me stop you there. It's funny you say that because I was actually thinking of that this morning. I'm back in an office now, working in an office environment, not doing the recruiting. And so that's kind of what I liked was the transition to more of the team environment, but still everybody's not back in the office yet. We have a good amount, but not everybody. And I like coming into the office. I just kind of like interacting with people and because you can do a lot of informal learning and growth, but I can't imagine, you have a pretty important role there. You're walking into an empty office. How did you, with the challenges of COVID, do what you wanted to do, which is articulate the vision, build the team? How did you do that when it was you in an office alone?
what I think I was able to successfully do was pound the pavement at the other 6 hospitals. I think one of the things that from a large corporate office setting, which as being a part of corporate leadership for the entire system, we were necessarily bound to one specific place, but we had access to everything. And so I learned pretty quickly that I wasn't going to accomplish anything I needed to do being at the corporate office. So you can't hit a moving target, right? So my goal was to build relationships at each one of the hospitals. So I learned this from my old roles working for Sodexo and Aramark, being a district manager and a client executive, that you have to be at the sites. And so I spent the majority of my first year just seeking to understand, just walking into each one of the service lines to understand what they do, who are the leaders, who are the colleagues that we spend the most time with, just so I can articulate what I want the vision to be. Organization structure, training and development. Do we have a path for growth? Those were the types of things that I was taking notes on. And I spent the first 90 to 120 days I just shut up and just observed, just walked around, looked, introduced myself, tried to be as observant as possible, tried to understand exactly what everybody was doing, what they were struggling with, create a net of psychological safety for those teams, so they could feel free to speak freely, tell me the things that they liked, tell me the things that they didn't like. And one of the things I did also was I didn't come in and I didn't throw a set of expectations on the table. What I wanted to hear was how different were the expectations for each one of those leaders. You're talking about 7 service lines. Some of them have multiple leaders that they report to, and everybody wants something different. And so here I am walking through the door, about to throw something different on them. Instead, I said, well, what do you expect from me? Like, what is your measure of success for me as a leader? Like, I want someone to say, hey, look, is Donya being effective for you? And I want you to say, yes. What does that mean for you? And so I took that into consideration when I started developing what I wanted the program to be and how I wanted us to behave and how I wanted us to serve the community and our colleagues.
Interesting. Net of psychological safety. I like that. Did you come up with that on your own, or did you hear that? So I like that.
So precursor, I just stole all the stuff. So it comes from.
Listen, nothing's original, right? I mean, there's few things in the world are original. You take it and you define. So that's good. So who'd you take it from? Do you recall, or are you just taken?
It might have been Patrick Lencioni. I'm trying to think of one of the many books that I've read. I mean, I have so many concepts that I think are just great ideas, and one of the ones that you'll probably hear as we continue to talk down this path is something in Japanese culture called ikigai, and it's the ikigai. And it's a fantastic read. It's something that I've tried to incorporate in my leadership teams. And it's pretty simple, right?
It's a book.
Yeah, the book. I mean, it's a Japanese principle of how to live a rewarding and fulfilling life. And it's simple. What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And how can you get paid for it? Which is my favorite at the end. So it's a lot more complex than that. Yeah. But there are books that outline it and the reasons why in those types of cultures they live longer and they're more happier, because they take the things that they do every day and they incorporate the things that bring them joy. They do things that are closer to bringing them joy to their families, to their work life, because I think what the pandemic exposed was the hustle culture and how it is slowly killing us if we don't have perfect balance. And so it's one of those things that I tried to incorporate in my leadership teams once I got feedback from them. Once I understood how I needed to respond and how I needed to be present, it gave me the right motivations to be able to reach out and to get the results that we needed from Mount Carmel.
Cref provides strategic real estate solutions that enable organizations to get the most out of their physical infrastructure. At Cref, the difference is we're not just advisors, we're operators. Our expertise in strategic asset advisory, project management, regulatory preparedness, and finding operational efficiencies allows us to provide organizations with end-to-end visibility and insight into their real estate portfolios and physical assets.
How do you achieve the balance in a healthcare role where more and more is demanded on you? You probably have fewer resources, but yet you got to look out for the well-being of your employees. How do you balance all that?
We have to stay systemic, and be intentional in the way we communicate, and in the way we facilitate any type of request. So does it make sense, right? I mean, I think 3 or 4 times a day, I get offers from groups or teams with great ideas on how we can be more efficient. I don't have all the answers. I think that's the most important thing is I try to tell everybody is like, hey, listen, if I look like a big dumb jock, you are probably right. So we can't do this if we don't bring it to the table. So I want the craziest ideas. I want something that is going to improve our quality of life. And we've implemented a ton of processes here at Mount Carmel that were brought up from the colleagues themselves that just made life easier. And one of the things I told them is that, hey, listen, there's no pressure on if it works or not. If it doesn't work, we're going to fail fast. We're going to pivot. We're going to keep it moving. But the reality of it is it good for the gander? Number one, does it help us be more efficient? Does it communicate the needs of the patients? Does it communicate the needs of the colleagues we serve? And is it affordable? That's another thing. We gotta have a financial stewardship in order for us to keep it going. You'd be surprised some of the things that some of our frontline colleagues and our leadership colleagues have come up with in terms of making it more efficient. And so with that being said, we've allowed ourselves to squeeze in that free time. I believe that our ministry, Mount Carmel, and not necessarily as Trinity Health as a whole, I believe our ministry has a reputation for doing more with less because we try to seek out the ingenuity of it all. And it's not to get out of work. It's just for us to be able to focus on those other things. I also believe in each one, teach one. If you know something and you have a skill, like we don't have a culture to where we hoard it and we leverage it against something so we can be successful. We share it with everybody. We make sure that all the good ideas get posted. We make sure that we all get credit. And one of the things that I try to do is I make sure I lead from behind. I think that's also one of those leadership skill sets that not a lot of people know about, leading from the back, and allowing your team to be in the forefront and getting everybody to understand that, listen, I'm not successful if it's not for these folks that are working and making sure that these things happen. The other thing is protecting someone's silence. And what I mean by that is that when you're on vacation, you're on vacation. Don't send me an email at 9 o'clock at night, on a Friday where your out of office is on. I don't care how important you think it is. I want to protect the peace that you have when you're here. And I need you to understand that the operation is going to run without you. And that is absolutely okay. That your value is not based on how bad we need you. Your value is based on the fact that you're valuable. Period, point blank. And we don't put scales on it or anything like that. So when you walk away and you go on vacation, you need to understand that you need to focus, recharge, because when we get back, the grind is going to be here. And so the grind is never going away, right? The hustle is never going away. But when you do, I need you to be completely unplugged. And I got to respect that. And I don't care how bad the emergency is. I've had leaders go on vacation and Joint Commission showed up. And guess what? They didn't get a telephone call. Because everybody that's here today, I trust them.
Yeah.
And even in Mount Carmel, I think one of the things that I did, that I had the opportunity to do in this role is never miss a survey. When a surveyor pulls up, guess who's standing next to the director? Me. Guess who's walking on all the survey days? Me. And it's one of those things to where I want to make sure I set a tone for the teams that when you take my place, if you take my place, the expectation is that you're going to always be here, regardless of how competent or anything else. It's not about trust or anything like that. I absolutely trust you, but I want you to know that I'm here for a resource. If you shoo me away and say, hey, Donya, I'm going to do document review myself, can you go and just make sure we're looking at life safety items and anything in the EC or EP or LS or anything like that, anything that could catch me slipping. Can you go check that for me? I'm at your service. I'm not dictating or running this survey. I'm here as an extra resource. You tell me what to do. And so it's really empowered the leaders to step out and to be able to facilitate, even telling the presidents. I've seen them tell presidents, hey, can you help me out with this really quick? I want you to check that and make sure that code's not on the door. Something crazy that was actually coming up. So it's been an experience. It's only been 3 years, and it feels like maybe 6 months because it's been going so fast. But I'm so proud of what this organization has been able to accomplish in 36 months. Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those spaces that I hope to be here just to see it a little bit longer before I decide what's next for me.
Yeah, very interesting, man. You said a lot there. I want to go back to one thing you mentioned. You talked about allowing the failure on the ideas, but you talked about any idea, bring all these ideas, and then you talked about some that actually they worked well. Is there an idea, like an idea you recall that when you initially heard it, you're like, man, that's crazy, but then when you implemented it, worked? Is there an idea that sticks with you when you think to that, something that you thought was outlandish, but in reality, it actually worked?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think we all need to get rid of from a health system standpoint, and I'm not going to use the name of the organization because number one, they're not paying us, and number two, that would probably be something that would require a different discussion for a different health system. But we all use radios. It's an old school hardwired process, and it's very siloed. I even had the attitude that, it just is what it is. Like nothing about it was changed. And somebody brought a piece of technology to me, and I looked at it and was just like, this is ridiculous. And I said, okay, I'll hear it out, because we have a Shark Tank environment. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll hear it out. I said, but in the back of my mind, I started casting doubt already, which was already a failure in what I planned to propose in the first place. So we started looking at the technological capabilities of this system and started realizing that it logs a verbatim, word for word diagram of every conversation that you have on it. It's able to break down multiple languages. The cost of a radio, if you're replacing a broken radio, is $1,000. To replace this little thing costs $100. It runs on Wi-Fi, and it runs on cellular. So there's a redundancy. In facilities how we love our redundancies, our N+1s, right? Yeah. And as I started listening to it, I started feeling like a complete and total idiot because I didn't give it a shot. And so I spoke to the regional director of supply chain, and he said, well, it's interesting you said that, because one of my leaders brought it up, and I just kind of, we don't need another thing. And I said, well, I'm about to implement it in security facilities and, in some of the other places. And so we started working through that process, and then it started growing legs, throughout the system. And then we started talking about some of the things that were happening over at Ascension and Common Spirit with the cyber attacks and how it was shutting down entire operations. And so how do you communicate? You go from this completely digital process when there's a cyber attack and your entire infrastructure is shut down. How do you go to communicate? And so all of a sudden, those little bitty pucks got really, really important. And then as we started to promote it a little bit more throughout the other ministries, it started to grow legs. And so this one thing that in 15 seconds, we completely just kind of brushed away as just, another way to spend money, actually became the lifeblood of how you're going to communicate going forward if there was ever any type of issue from a system standpoint. And it's been fantastic.
Really
and let's just say that there's a disagreement. And I haven't had to deal with it yet, but let's just say that there's a disagreement, and someone says, hey, I communicated this action, and I told them exactly what I was going to do. You can actually go back to the transcript and provide the information. It's absolutely fantastic. It's completely accessible everywhere, aside from you having it on your person. It's accessible if you download the app on your phone, on your computer. You can hear traffic. it is the most amazing thing. And then it can even get fancy to where you can pinpoint where one of your colleagues are just in case you want to see who's safer. Like, let's just say if there's a code red, hypothetically speaking, or if there's a fire alarm code on the panel and one of my operators needed to know who's closer to it to check it out, number one, and to see if it's available to be deactivated or changed or anything like that. We could turn on the system to where we'll know who's closer, ask that person to do it, and can get the information in real time on whether it was done and it was completed. So it's a ton of applications, all brought up from a really good idea from a colleague who leaned into the process.
Has there been anybody who's a little leery of that level of recording?
Yeah. And so one of the things I tell them, one of the things I always tell the leaders is that we are a group of men and women who most likely have children and real life things happening. When we communicate any type of change and we communicate any type of adverse news, any type of great news, we need to communicate it as we communicated. We need to communicate it as adults, right? We need to tell the truth. We need to be intentional with how we communicate it, and we need to talk about it as we would as if we're sitting down having this conversation, because we're all adults, right? We all empathize. We all have empathy because we experience the same things. We experience it on different levels, but it's the same thing. There is nothing that we are going through that somebody else is not experiencing right now, or doesn't know someone that's experiencing. So we need to have that mind frame. We need to go in it with that level of empathy, and we just need to have a direct conversation. So one of the things I told the team when we said that is, of course, I got a couple of my good ones that are conspiracy theorists, and they were just like, "Hey, how do you know it's not recording?" I said, "Well, because I don't have the transcript, number one." And they said, "Well, I don't know how I feel about that." I said, "So you know that conversation I had years ago on the radio when I told you that don't say anything on the radio that you wouldn't say to your mom?" I said, "Same thing. It's the same thing." And they were like, well, when you put it that way, it kind of makes sense. I'm just like, same thing. The only difference is that this is a tiebreaker. I said, think about it. How many times have we been in a situation where you said, I gave specific instructions on what to do, and they said, well, I only heard this. This is a tiebreaker.
That's great. So let's go with the tiebreaker theme for a minute. Donya and I were talking before I hit the record button, and we were talking a little bit. So he's in Ohio, in Columbus. We were talking a little bit about Ohio State football, and we were talking about expectations. And Donya talked about leadership, and you said you were a dumb jock. You played college football, probably not dumb, but you talked about leadership and how transitioning from the athletic environment into the management environment, the parallels and lessons and what you've learned and how you manage that. I asked him to stop talking because I didn't want to use that when we weren't recording. Can you get back to that though a little bit? What are the leadership parallels? Like, what did you learn about leadership when you played football that you're still using today, and how closely are they aligned?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely aligned. I mean, so much aligned that we call giving feedback in any way, shape, form, or fashion coaching. So I think athletes from the ability of having to be coachable and understanding from a hierarchical standpoint, there are some parallels in good and bad, and some things that you want to keep, some things you want to throw out and stuff like that. But the reality of it is that the fundamentals of coaching, of being able to teach and instruct and get everyone work as a team, they either come from the military complex, right? I mean, not necessarily industrial complex, but from military and organizational leadership, or it comes from sports in terms of coaching and the ability to be coached. Mentorship, some of the, one of the most important things to me, and what's been extremely important in my career, and the ability to understand that it looks different, that you have to be able to recognize it. And in order for you to become someone's mentor, you have to understand the amount of time and energy that it takes to be a proper leader and a proper mentor. And so, and leadership looks different. There are leaders who lead from the front, and there are leaders that lead from the back. There are leaders that don't want anybody to know that they are leading, but in their actions, in their words, in the empathy that they show, they are considered to be the unappointed leader of certain departments. Those are the ones that I gravitate to. The ones that do it every day. That just come in, that get it done. They don't make a big fuss about it. Because somewhere they probably are uncomfortable with it. But how do you find a way to reward that? Like, how do you find a way to fully understand what that thought process is? So I'm very curious about the different ways that people lead, because I think it's important and it's incumbent upon me to understand it as much as I possibly can, so I can be the best person I can be. That when I walk into the door, they're getting the best person, they're getting the best version of myself that I could possibly give them. Because we all have good days, right? And we want our good days to be great, and we want our bad days to be great. And when we have those bad days from some of the outside noise that's happening, what do some of those leaders do to quiet that noise and to focus on the now? Yeah. How do we put it to the side? And how do we understand that lashing out is not a reflection on you directly, but it's a reflection on the environment and everything else that's happening around us? And I think from a leadership standpoint, one of the most important things I've always told my team is that we go back to psychological safety, right? Is that there's nothing you say here to me that I will take personally. I say it to myself. I write it down, because I think we have a tendency to take feedback and to take it personal, and it's not because of the words, it's because of the feelings. It's because of the outside noise that's affecting us, or something that's weighing us down, and we associate those things together. They are not the same. And so what I want my colleagues and I want my leaders to do is to be able to walk in my office to talk about a process that's not working or not working for them, and to be able to communicate it freely with the understanding that I'm going to listen. And my eyes might twitch because I'm human, but I'm processing the information. When I'm having a hard time with it, I always tell them, hey, can you give me just a second so I can process it? I'm having a really hard time with it, and I just want to understand how I can do this better. And it doesn't slow down anything. It gives them a chance to pause and say, and when people say, well, I'll come back. No, I don't want you to come back, because this is a great exercise for us. And it teaches us about how to communicate critically, and how to understand where the line is, and I tell them, I'll never take it personally. Now, you talk about my wife, we might have a problem. You say my kids are ugly, we might have a problem. But other than that, this is business. Yeah. And so we have to work together to try to solve it and try to make sure we're doing what's best for the organization and for the patients. But as a leader, the ability to take feedback and to understand that if something's not working right, it's not a reflection on you. Look at the system, look at the process. Is it working? And if it isn't working, stand in front of the team and say, you know what? I thought I had a really good idea. That sucked. So let's move on to something else. Right. Any ideas? Yeah. And just keeping the team engaged, because I think one of the worst things, and I've had leaders like that, one of the worst things is not admitting when we need to pivot or when we need to deviate, because that's hubris. And I don't ever want to be in a situation to where I let my pride get in the way of me making the right decision for everybody else, because I'll lose the entire team. Yep.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that you will occasionally, when somebody's talking to you, you'll say, hey, can you give me a second to process the information? So you take that pause, you think about it. I think a lot of the times, what do you think? Like, I think sometimes as leaders, as parents, as whatever we think so, we need to have that answer. I don't think we don't always allow ourselves that time to process and think, because I think sometimes we think the expectation is, no, you got to come up with a solution right away. And you're making that pause. And I think we all need that, right? I mean, we're not computers.
Yeah. It's the tyranny of the now, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I think the most human thing that we can do as people is admit that I don't have it today. I mean, okay, so we were talking about sports, right? Sports, one of the things that are extremely strange is we expect so much athletic excellence from these young kids and these adults in college sports and in professional sports that there are days where we wake up as human beings, and we don't have it today.
Yeah.
Like there are days I wake up and I don't know what happened, and I must have slept on a pillow wrong, and I can't think straight to save my life.
Yeah.
And aside from thinking straight, you're making bad decisions out in the field.
Yep.
You're making bad decisions. You're like, people are asking you questions. Everything's coming at you as fast as possible. And for some strange reason, you're just not fast enough today. And so I guess it really comes down to empathy and really understanding that man, this looks terrible.
Right.
This really looks terrible. So as a leader, how do you recognize it?
Yeah.
Like, how do you see that someone's having a bad day, and how do you pull them and have them sit down for a second and say, hey, listen, how's everything going? I mean, of course, naturally, it's everybody's natural response to say, oh, I'm fine, and just say, all right, so I hear that you're fine. Let me show you what it looks like. You know what I mean? Like, do we need a minute? And then once you show that level of understanding, you show that level of empathy about what's really going on, then you get the truth. And then from that point, it's just like, you know what? Do we need to take a minute? Like, maybe we should punt this one off for the day, just so we can have some time to relax. I mean, it can be something as minor as, you know what? I got a flat tire this morning and I just been like, it completely threw off my routine, to something as major as I got a migraine and I can barely keep my eyes open. And I just think that we live in this culture to where we've been expected to operate. And sometimes we just can't function. You know what I mean? And we think that pushing through to the finish line is the most important thing, and it's not. Like, the reality of it is that we've trained an entire army of colleagues and future leaders to be able to pick up the ball. This is a great opportunity to put somebody else in the forefront. Now, these are those things that when we're talking about succession planning and stuff like that, well, maybe this is a good opportunity for your supervisor to kind of take over the meeting. Hey, can you do some mop up duty for us today? Like, I'll be here to support you and everything else. I'm going to send this leader home, and just give them time to relax and refresh. It's been an off day, with the understanding that anytime that ever happens for any one of my other leaders and colleagues, we're going to do the same. So again, we circle back to, psychological safety of being able to tell us what's really going on and to really trust our teams to come in for us when we have to, when we need their help and when we need their support.
This concludes episode 1. Please return to the Healthcare Facilities Network in the near future to view episode 2.